Everybody, welcome to yet another episode of Build in Public podcast. Today, I have to really get this intro right, because this is a guy, this is an entrepreneur, this is a founder, creator that I admired from afar for a long time and read all the stuff, read all the newsletters, was really an influential person, both from an energy and the vibe, but also from the wisdom and a lot of wholesome content he puts out there about his family and about his daughters and about productivity and the 10K work. I think these are the hints you may have already pictured who this person is with the hat backwards. It is Khe Hy. Welcome to the podcast, Khe.
What's up, KP? Thank you so much. Thank you for that intro. What I want to tell you though is I'm the one, all this time I've been watching you talk and build. I'm like, yo, am I gonna get on this podcast someday? I'm the one wondering. So it's so funny how it all works. But it's a pleasure. And
I appreciate it. And look, I think we this is something that I've seen as a pattern. Like among some of the greatest people that I've interviewed, I think if there's one thing I could tell myself from 10, 15 years ago is that the game recognizes game, and there was a lot of self-doubt, and that's actually one of my opening prompts for our convo here, is that, a lot of self-doubt that I had as an immigrant in the US, kind of finding my identity and trying to fit in. And I know you talked about this in many interviews, was around am I enough, right? And what part of me do I need to refine, work on, get better at so that I can be much more accepted? And I really thought it was money and public accomplishments and things of that nature, status and accomplishments. And what I've learned after 10, 15 years now, I'm 33, is actually the greats, the game, the people who you look up to, the people who inspire you, who you admire, they don't really care about those things. They don't really care about the bank, numbers in your bank account, nor do they care about the number of, followers you have. I think ultimately there's a sense of mutual recognition. They see a little bit of you in them, but them in you, and vice versa. And more importantly, it's really about your ambitious proof of work. And that's what stood out for me, is that they know that it's really a matter of time and matter of volume of work and proof of work. And on the other side doesn't matter, wherever you are. It's just really putting in those reps and sets. And for me, I wish I knew this. I could have really enjoyed my ride here to this place where I am in my career. But I feel it's been a pattern, interviewing Gary Vee and Alexis, all of these, insanely humble. And they completely recognize, this truth. That is, we're not any different. We're all doing the same. We're all, trying to help people and add value. Okay, let's talk about this. You've touched on identity crisis a little bit. Give me a sense of the younger version of Khe, who was battling and wrestling with, am I enough?
Wow, that sweet young boy. So I'll paint a picture, because...
Give me a picture. Tell me about the walk you took from the coffee shop. Literally walk us through what block around your home.
Yeah. So we grew up in the East Village of New York City, Stuyvesant Town, 14th Street, if those of you are familiar. Brick, big apartment complex, I think 60,000 people live in that complex. And, New York, so I'm born in 79, so I'm almost 43. New York, people forget that New York in the 80s and New York in the 90s was very different than the New York that it is today. And I think one of the big things is just way less safe. So way less gentrified, way less safe. And so, I guess I was average height. I'm 5'10" and a half now. So I guess that makes me average height. But I was a skinny freaking kid. So skinny that you just you couldn't see my shoulder line. It was just I was neck and torso sans shoulder.
I'm imagining a young KD right now.
Except for the average height part.
Right.
But yeah, it's just super skinny. I kind of walk a little bit funny, I'm bow-legged, so my feet kind of splay out to the side when I walk. So just kind of awkward, kind of uncomfortable, kind of skinny. And then you got my parents. I love my parents, incredible parents. They're tiger parents. And so there's Dad, can I get a new, what was the brand? A Ralph Lauren polo shirt, right? Is it on sale at Marshall's?
Right.
No, it's not. It's $65 for a polo shirt? No way.
Go back and finish your test prep, right?
Exactly. And so, I wanted to belong. And I think now that I'm older, I think that my parents wanted to belong too. Like they came to New York in the early 70s. They didn't have any family or any friends and they barely spoke English. So I think we all want to belong, right?
Yeah.
We all want to belong. And I think everyone was having their journey of belonging. And for me, it was belonging socially, belonging in high school, belonging in junior high, but being like a physically awkward kid, and that physical awkwardness translated into social awkwardness.
Right.
And I didn't have these like cool, hip American parents that were like teaching me how to navigate the culture of like East Village, New York City culture.
Right.
Right. So I just kind of felt out of place. I just wanted to belong. And let's cut to the chase. Like I wanted to have a girlfriend. And that was not really in the cards for me in junior high and in high school. So, there was like a lot of dis-ease in that version of Khe, right? Just like didn't really like, you see me now, I'm like always smiling and energetic. And
so if I met you on the subway, would you be like, would you have been just shy, like minding your business?
So shy. I would not like talk to strangers. Like I would not strike up conversation. I would not ask a lot of questions, just like keep to myself. Right. I think like many of the traits that I have now is like very curious, like very studious.
Charismatic. It's been fantastic to hear about that, is that you're insanely charismatic today. And like, with the surfing and all the things you just talked about. I mean, we all outside in feel about you feels almost unbelievable given that background, right? Given that childhood.
Well, I think that says a few things. One is like people can change. I'll tell you one thing that like I'm on camera either doing interviews or presenting like on average 90 minutes a day for multiple days a week. When I was in finance, I always got straight A's like in my performance reviews, but one criticism always: you suck at public speaking.
I swear
to God.
Oh my God.
They were scared to put me in front of clients. I still actually say
the funniest. It's like saying David Perel sucks at writing. That's the funniest thing.
I still say like a lot. I still use but I've gotten better at that. But that wasn't my thing. So I say that so that your listeners can be like, yo, you could change.
Yeah.
Right. The narrative it's not even the narrative. It's the actual lived experience can change.
Yeah.
So,
actually, that's double clicking that. Was there a point, like, do you remember an inflection point in terms of somebody making a comment or some self-discovery element where you went from, you know what, I could be a much better public speaker, and I think I have that in me, and I know I'm set. Like I for me, it happened, and I'll tell you where. But like, I'm curious about like what set you on the path of improvement and where you are now.
I think that there's two things that come to mind. The first was, I remember very specifically, it's actually a theme of RadReads, is self-awareness. And so I didn't even, using crutch words like and so on, I didn't even know that I was doing that. And so when I would present in Wall Street, I would have one of my colleagues, I'd say, hey, can you just count how many times I said like when it's my turn to speak? And he'd just count them, and then he'd tell me at the end. So bringing that self-awareness, I would also practice speaking to like a recorded iPhone just to rewatch. It's so awkward when you're not used to public speaking. It's so awkward.
It is. I hate that, by the way. Yeah.
So
I can't.
Getting that, it's a little bit like exposure therapy.
What was your North Star there? What was driving you to get better at public speaking?
I just knew it was important. I mean, it's that straightforward. I mean, I didn't like having a ding on my resume,
right?
Or in my I wanted all straight A's. I didn't want like one B. So I wanted that. But I think also as you get older,
your parents are smiling somewhere right now.
Exactly.
They're like, "I'm proud of my boy." Right? Yeah.
Exactly. And as I get older, you realize that it's such a superpower, just a professional superpower, that you're just at a disadvantage if you don't have it. So it was those two things. But honestly, KP, now with RadReads, almost anything with RadReads, writing, tweeting, like just overnight, I got 4,000 new Twitter followers overnight.
Yeah.
And writing, tweeting, public speaking, it's just the reps. I just been doing it for so long. It's just the reps.
There's no secret sauce. I mean, people have these very complex, like sophisticated answers to it. I'm like, 90% of it is just reps, showing up, doing it for too long, right? Like more long, like the Kobe style, just like, And the 10% of it is like some tactics and techniques and like learning from others. Like that's really why part of my reason of this podcast is an excuse to kind of learn from other smart people. And it's the same way, like, I'm sure you do a lot of like peer-to-peer learning. Like you ask other people some of the dumb questions you've been holding for a while. And then once that's taken care of, you're good to go. You go back to the reps, right?
Yep.
So for me, what I want to share, like another interesting anecdote, and the reason I asked you about like what drove you to public speaking was somebody like told me, and this is like a shocking thing. Like somebody told me, Kippy, you're a terrific community person. You're going to be a great community leader. And this is so funny because I'm like, similar to you, I had a background where I was very shy and English is my second language. I speak Telugu at home, even now with my parents, when we FaceTime, English is like a learned skill. Like we had to practice a lot. So I was like you, like a straight A student, academically really bright. I always had like, great like rankings and everything, but I never really wanted to be in the spotlight. I was so afraid of it. And I also had a lot of self-doubt around like, am I good enough physically? All this like similar traits. Like I'll flash a picture maybe to the audience after this episode in the show notes. Like it's unbelievable. Like I can't believe like, I know why I didn't have a girlfriend then, right? Because I was like, unbelievable. I would not date myself.
I'll find you one pic. We can put both of our pictures.
You should do that. Like I can't, like I would not date myself. Like so. With all those, I guess, baggage and limiting beliefs, everything, as I got into adulthood or as I got into 20s, I never taught myself. Like I wanted to be the invisible fly in the community. So when I would go to networking events, I would be like, leave me alone. But at the same time, I recognize the value of connecting and knowing people and getting to know. But I once, 2018 or 19, I think I kept doing, out of nowhere, I started doing these monthly dinners / meetups for indie hackers in Atlanta. And because the main host ghosted on us, I became sort of the default host. And I just really enjoyed it. I enjoyed getting a pizza sponsor. I enjoyed giving an intro to everybody. I enjoyed like getting everybody to pitch or share what they're working on. And that's when the guy who said this, Drew Riley, if you know from Trent VC, he came to one of my meetups and he said, KP, you're going to do great. You're going to be an amazing community leader. And I was like, what is he talking about? What is community even, right? But then like I learned to hone into it, kind of like you with public speaking. I realized the value of it and then leaned in and went full all in, So there's so many times in life you just one conversation away or one inflection point away.
And I think I'm glad you shared that story because it's a reminder to me and to our listeners too, that if you see someone with a talent, they may not see it in themselves.
Yes.
So just tell them.
Yes.
Just be like, you're an amazing X.
Right.
And that one comment can change the trajectory of their life. And you're not even blowing smoke up their ass.
Also, like I think that being authentic is important there, right? Like not just, to your point, not just complimenting for the heck of it. But I think, Kay, I wonder if you felt something similar where I've noticed one of my favorite thing to observe in high achievers is that, especially high achievers who are likable, charismatic, is that they compliment others way more than they receive compliments. They sometimes go out of their way and actually come. I've received that so many times as one of my traits, which by the way, I don't even think about it. But I think there's a sense of, maybe that's another secret sauces of being a community person, is that you are not afraid to acknowledge and compliment someone's uniqueness. And I do this all the time. If I like your hat, I'll tell you. If I like your beard, I'll tell you. And I've said this to people at every level. I've said this to Eric Thornburg, founders. I've said this to billionaires. I've said this to someone who just joined Twitter Spaces, right? If I hear their voice, I'm like, oh my God, you have the podcast voice. I think there's a correlation between how much you compliment others through the day. I don't know if I'm true or this is right or wrong, and how blissful you feel through the day. There's a sense of like other orientedness in genuinely compliment, not bullshitting. Genuinely compliment.
And I think humans, I think you're totally right. Humans crave these like micro acts of connection. And I think I take it a lens further. It's even rare amongst men.
Yes.
Because you just said like I'd compliment someone on their nice beard. You didn't say like their nice shirt when you're a man or a woman. Like men are not used to, it's like the way men are not used to like touching each other, like hugging and so on. And so when you break that wall with a compliment or something nice, then it changes the whole dynamic. And we crave that, right? It's like, I think like, we may talk about it's like, well, one of the big observations that I've had about happiness or joy is it's just an accumulation of little moments. Right. And you see that especially when you become a father. It's like, the first couple, it's not like my kid's not, hitting home runs, walk-off home runs at T-ball or winning medals in dance contests. Like, no, it's just like, hey, Dad, today was the best day of my life, or that was so funny when you tripped, right?
Yeah.
And that's it. And it's just you string a bunch of those together for a lifetime, and that is like and so when these little micro acts of connection with others, with your kids, with your spouse, with you, with people on Twitter, like that's life. That's
Right.
That's the beauty of life, not this like, oh, like I got a retweet that I got a tweet that went viral today.
Right.
It's like, oh, that makes me so happy.
Right. It's almost the, like, to your point, like it's always the little things and the ones that you don't expect. Because I think there's a sense of novelty, like the fact that you didn't expect that coming in. You were like, wow, I can't believe like KP complimented me on like something, right? And if you go around doing this daily, you're not doing it out of pressure. I'm just doing it because I notice it. And also it makes you a better noticer of things too, which is helpful because I'm someone with a very poor, shitty memory. So unless I remember that you wore a pink hat on my podcast interview, like Khe is forever recognized, like stored in my database, whatever, like this picture right here.
Pink hat,
as opposed to like if I remembered you from Brooklyn was this whatever, right? So I think there's something about that too. So, Khe, again, I love the riff nature of this conversation. And I know this is what you said that you wouldn't mind getting into. So I'm blaming you for the lack of structure here. One of my favorite things that I've seen you execute so well, and I'm low-key jealous, but in a positive way, is you're insanely consistent with the newsletter, with the writing game. And I know some part of it is reps and sets. It's just about showing up. Just break it down for us, for the audience, for the listeners. Okay. What is your writing routine look like on your ideal state? And tell me, what is the least acceptable floor? Like, what was your, like, okay, this is the bare minimum I'm going to do, and that's acceptable.
Got it. Okay. So let's step back and look at the full picture. We're hitting send on RadReads 335 on Saturday, 335. I think I started writing an essay around RadReads 100, a weekly essay.
Right.
So that's like 225 essays. Weeks
and
essays.
Wow. Yeah.
I think in the 225, there's probably been maybe, I took one summer off, one summer I alternated, and then maybe like 4 breaks per year. So there might have been, there's not that many breaks in that.
Right.
So here's a little secret. You ask this question, people ask me this question often. You're expecting to hear that there's this like crazy editorial calendar, and there's like a Zettelkasten in Rome that is hooked up to Zapier to a Notion Kanban calendar. And then there's a VA somewhere that's like line editing it. And to this day, you want to hear the writing process?
I don't know if I'm ready for it, but lay it on me.
So to this day, on Monday, I start thinking, what am I going to write about this week? And then throughout the week, I'm observing. And one of the things I really like to do in my writing is to write about what's trending in that week. Because I think that just increases the likelihood that people will want to read it. And it's just more
resonance, right? What resonates most. Yeah.
So I'm kind of observing. I'll tell you, like, so this week, I know that I have, we're promoting our course. So we're kind of in like the warm up period. So I want to do something related to the course. And just the other day, an idea hit me. And the idea hit me is that there's 2 types of productivity. Fear-based productivity.
Right.
Like hustle culture, there's never enough, got to compete to beat others, more, bigger, faster, break things stuff. And then there's joy-based productivity, which is like zone of genius.
Right.
In your flow, you smile a lot. It's effortless. Wu Wei, if you're familiar with the Eastern philosophy, the Zen term. So it kind of hit me. And I was just sitting in my car as I thought about this. And so this is one of
the theme, I guess, right?
This is the beauty of the newsletter, is that it's basically where I experiment. So I'm going to write this post, and then on Monday, 2 days, we'll let people read it over the weekend. We're going to see if people think it's as interesting as I think it is. And it's probably not going to be black and white.
But how would you assess it? Like, what's the feedback loop for you?
So there's a few feedback loops. One would be just people replying. So the first one will be like, you're a writer, like you have an idea in your head. It sounds great in your head. Once you write it, you're like, oh, that was kind of a shitty idea.
Yeah, that's
the first step. Like once it comes out, there might be some lost in translation. And you're like, oh, this wasn't as good. But let's assume it comes out good. Then there'll be a few things. I'll also tweet about it throughout the week, because I incubate the idea on Twitter with a tweet thread, a tweet storm. So I'll kind of see the flow there. And then on Saturday morning, I'll write it. So I try to hit send by 9 Pacific so I can go surfing.
Yeah.
And so I'll wake up at about 6. So I have about 3 hours.
3 hours to finish the draft. Wait, did the draft already start? Maybe a day? Oh, wow.
No, I just took notes.
It's a cold start, right?
Cold
okay.
Start. It's one sitting. That's why there's so many typos.
Dude, you're like dispelling so many myths. Like you're just like destroying so many books and productivity systems, as you say.
Exactly. So then I sit down. The only one is that you would think that 335 weeks later, I don't need a deadline. No, I need the deadline.
The positive constraint.
I need the constraint. I can't start it on Monday. I've tried for I've been doing this for 2015. I've been doing this for 7 years. I still need the constraint.
I think you probably will be the most relatable guest on the pod today. I feel like that's so many people though. There's so many people, they know they have to ship something on Saturday, but they can't start Monday.
No.
They can't.
No effing way. Yeah. So I sit down and then I write it for 3 hours. I edit it. I have a hard stop because I gotta surf. Like I'm not leaving an essay to dawdling on an essay to avoid surfing. So I go, and then the week goes by. We'll get people will reply, and then I'll look at the click through rate. So last week I did another massive piece on GTD, and I thought it was like really good, but it was very nerdy inside baseball GTD stuff. So I'm like, it'll do average. It was like gangbusters. So like people were relating to it. So I'm like, oh, okay. And you would think that like, I take note in my head. I'm kind of like, it's like you noticing someone's beard is slightly different. I'm like, oh yeah, like the GTD thing, that was an outlier. Like, whenever the expected result is different than the actual result, little light bulb goes off. Like make a mental note, Kate, like people like the GTD thing more, like recalibrate the algo.
Right.
And then see the observations, and then then we might go back, and if it's really good, we might like make a YouTube video out of it. We might incorporate it as a module into the course. We might use it as a launching pad for a free event. So we try to reuse the content like 3-4 times. Twitter, YouTube, event, Notion template, TweetStorm.
Oh, that's the name of the game, repurposing. Yeah.
So repurposing. That's pretty new though. Like I only figured that out like
I think underrated, super underrated. I think, it's kind of like what they say about sales follow-ups. Everybody thinks that it's the first sales email that's going to win the contract. It's actually the 8 follow-ups that happen after.
Totally.
Same way, everybody thinks the net new content is winning.
Totally.
Is the thing that wins to kind of gain audience is actually the repurposing,
Totally.
And we're seeing like Dickie Bush does a great job. Like Danny Miranda, this guy, I don't know if you know him, but he's been crushing it with repurposing. So
good. So that's, I wish there was some crazy elaborate process, but it's like the process is there's a constraint. And I think the thing that I really want to reiterate is that a lot of them are average.
Yeah.
A lot of them are average, but I use this, it's my lab, it's my way of showing up for my community. And the thing is that the community then, it's a part of their habit, right? Like reading an essay from Khe, and it doesn't have to be the world's greatest essay.
Right.
It's just an essay from Khe. It's almost like a podcast in that regard.
Right.
Where there's like a scheduled connection between reader and creator. And dude, you do that for 7 years, man. Fuck, man.
Yeah.
Some crazy shit will happen.
Yeah. And they'll really get a hang of your worldview. Yeah. And they'll try to chime in and add and expand that as they can, right? And so I think that's another surprising discovery for me has been in the last 2 years where I really 10x to my community outreach and my Twitter game is I didn't realize how big of a role they want to play in your content creation, right? And I don't even think of myself as a creator. I think of myself as a co-creator.
Yeah.
Right? The difference between a founder and a co-founder, I think as a content creator, I think I'm a content co-creator. The other part is the audience.
I love it.
And that's why it's important to do it in public. And, my whole myth is building in public or learning in public, asking in public. And so it's been fascinating how much they want to chime in, So let's do a jump cut into a whole different part of your life. I think you talked about parents and the fact that they were Cambodian immigrants, who moved to the US with not many friends and not much of a social life here. So it reminds me of my early days in the US as an Indian immigrant, 21-year-old. It was really hard. And, I think I finally, after 10 years, I feel like I'm slowly getting used to this.
You came to the US at 21.
Yes, for my master's.
I was born here.
And so I think I relate more to your parents, than you perhaps. But I want to know, what does it feel like to be a kid? Because I want to know what does it feel like to be Neil, my son, was born to an Indian immigrant. And for you, like in terms of what were some aspirations you had as a kid? You know, like does the dreams change? Does the things you aspire for? Like I know if you like pulled an average American kid to born to and like maybe non-immigrant parents, ask them like, hey, what do you want to become? They'll be like astronauts or YouTube creator, right? TikTok dancer, whatever. What were yours? And
yeah, that's a good. My daughter asked me this question the other day. So I've always had a lot of hobbies and things. So if you ask me, what are some of the things that I wanted to be when I grew up? I mean, one was definitely like a magician. I loved
every kid's dream, right? I
loved card tricks. That was one of them. God. I also know how to juggle.
When did you give up, or are you still pursuing?
No, I lost interest in card tricks. I'm always down for a good juggle. I love juggling. And since I drink a lot of margaritas, like I'm always juggling limes.
Right.
There's always limes in my house, so I'm always juggling limes. So juggling, I really, really, really wanted to be a professional skateboarder.
Interesting.
So I skateboarded a lot as a kid. I was decent as a skateboarder. Skateboarding, a side note, is a very like 10,000 hours sport where it takes you like a year to learn one trick, like an ollie. Jumping, and then another year to learn another trick, like a kickflip where the board flips horizontally, then another year to learn like something else. And so it really like lent itself to my personality of just, right? Think about that.
Right.
A year to learn one trick as like a 12-year-old.
Right. Yeah.
Right. That was no instant gratification. There. So magician, I think I had the standard like scientist, physicist, scientist, chemist.
STEM, right? Yeah.
At some point. I'm trying to think other strange stuff. You know what though, KP? Part of it was I wanted to make money.
Yeah.
Like
I think that's a great point. Actually, I think that's where I kind of got that point from one of the videos you made, and you talked about how money was an aspiration growing up because that was a way to kind of feel belonged.
Yeah.
Fully. Could not agree more. And again, I guess part of the reason why immigrants move to America is to have a better life. One, so many other things, but it's this, feeling like this societal success can maybe replace the void that you feel. And I've had the same chase, and I know you shared this. So let's talk about how money was almost the thing that you pursued for a long time, but you changed your way.
Yeah, well, I wanted to belong, right? And so I think that when I think that culture tells you, and it may not be wrong, I'd have to think about this more, but culture tells you that there's a few ways that you can belong. And the key ones are status and a derivative of status, power, influence, right? And how do you what's like the easiest way to get status, power, and influence? It's through money. And so I've always been really good at like distilling things into playbooks. Like right now I'm distilling, like I know very little about SEO, but I just immersed myself in SEO conversations. And I think that I've distilled it into like a playbook that's going to work for our business. And so I love like immersing myself in like all this, like what seems like a very noisy thing and like distilling it into like a playbook. And so when I was a kid, I realized very quickly that if I wanted to get status, power, and influence, then the fastest way to do that was to get money.
Right.
And then once I figured out that I wanted to make money, then it's like, okay, like go to Yale, major in computer science, learn entrepreneurship. Like I'll tell you some crazy fun little facts about me. I was really good. I liked role-playing, like fantasy games and Final Fantasy and Warcraft and all that stuff. I was very good at Magic the Gathering. And I sold my collection in 1998, I think, or 96. I had all the most valuable cards, and I sold the collection for I think $4,000.
Wow!
And then I bought shares of the S&P 500 in 1996 with the $4,000, and I still haven't sold them.
Whoa!
So
that's
17-year-old K.
Wow!
Gifted 42.5-year-old K like $27,000 worth of stocks.
Insane.
That I still haven't spent. I'll probably give them to my kids at this point. So like to go back to your question, I could see around the edges of like how the games, and I think that's what I really enjoy about entrepreneurship is that it's like I know how to play the game. I opt out of a lot of the games, like because I choose not to play them, but I'm like it actually makes sense how to get there.
Right.
And so as a kid, it's like, okay, like play the game. And like, dude, I loaded up on the game. I taught myself how to invest. I learned HTML in 1995. I was coding HTML websites for like local florists for $20 an hour as a 16-year-old in 1995.
Wow.
That's like $40 an hour today.
Right.
Right. And so I was doing that. And then I was investing the money in the S&P 500 and then learning, like taking SAT prep so I could get into like the best school, and then reading books on C and C++ and Cold Fusion and PHP to like broaden my like non-academic skill set. This was all as like a 16-year-old.
Right.
But it was very motivated by that one thing, right?
Yeah.
Money will lead to power, status, and influence.
Right.
So that was
it's
like
the video game you chose. Right?
It was the game, and it was. I think maybe I'm going to sound arrogant saying this, but it was so obvious to me.
Right.
And the game on Wall Street was actually, once, I went to Yale, majored. I actually was a very mediocre student at Yale, only because the competition was so high. And I went to Wall Street. I was like, like a mediocre. I started a very like second tier bank, but I'm like, I can only look around. I'm like, I see how this game is played. Got to learn this kind of certain skills, one of which is public speaking. You got to grow this kind of network, these kind of relationships. You got to work this amount of hard. You need to be this organized. And then you need to be methodical about how you save and invest and like manage your money. And I was like, okay. And I did that. I did that for 15 years. And so this is probably where your original question got to. Like somewhere, I had a great career success in my. And
you quit the video game, right? And
I opted out of the video game,
right? And you say, I'm going to just switch up the cassette if you think about it.
But I think the interesting thing that your listeners will want to hear is that like, what was the catalyst? Like, why did you give it up? Right.
Right.
And I'll tell them a very simple example, quite recent. Ask anyone, ask it on Twitter. What was something you wanted so badly and you thought it would make you happy? And you got it. How did you feel 1 year later about that?
Right.
And people will be like making 6 figures, making 7 figures, making buying 8 figures, buying a home, paying down my loans, buying a second home, traveling, whatever. Every single dream that you have will be answered by that one question.
Yeah.
And I can't say that I figured that out, but I was starting to get a sneaking suspicion that this was.
That's where self-awareness kicks in. You kind of could read what's going on.
I was like, okay, got a great bonus. Very lucky. I bought a studio apartment in my late 20s.
Right.
Cool. Doesn't like, if you think like, say there's like a line chart of happiness, like you think like you're cruising, let's say you're like at a 4 out of 10. You buy an apartment, you're like, I'm going to be a 9.
Right.
You buy the apartment, you spike to a 9, and then
4 months
later, exactly, you mean revert.
You're back to the baseline.
4.1.
4.1, yep,
You're
exactly.
like slightly higher.
Yeah.
And then you're like, okay.
And you're feeling guilty too that you're not being 9. Sometimes I notice myself that I'm not being that stoked about the life that I made for myself. Should I be more stoked? But I return to my baseline, and I'm like,
totally. And then it's like an addict's behavior.
Yeah.
Because if the apartment only brought you a 0.1, you're like, well, I need 2 apartments.
Yeah.
But the 2 apartments don't even bring you 0.2.
Yeah.
They bring you like 1.6.
Yes.
Right? It's like logarithmic decay.
It's crazy. Yeah. And then you're right. And then towards the end, you're like, okay, you have 18 cars and then you got like 4 homes and you got, I don't know, it's 7,000
like
sneakers.
4.42.
Yeah. You're still at 4. Sometimes you may like look at I think it
might be negative.
Guilt compounds. That's what I'm saying. I think the guilt of feeling like maybe this is not the path compounds. Yeah. Also the guilt of feeling like I should be more happy. Why am I not happy? The frustration of not going to 9. Because you've seen 9, so you know what 9 feels like. Why am I not returning to that every day?
And then this is I've seen this with very wealthy people. Then every time you add like a new big thing, the complexity of your life increases. So then you spend all this mind space managing this new complexity.
Right.
Like people that have 2 homes. I'm like, I don't even have, I rent my house because I don't want the complexity of being a homeowner.
Right.
I want to call someone.
No, property taxes, everything 2x, right? Like, can you imagine?
Broken, fix it. Yesterday, boom. And so I felt really, to go back to your question, and all of those feelings, like I met my wife, we had our kid, I had an amazing group of friends and all that. But it turns out that belonging was not, even having an amazing wife and kids, like didn't make that feeling of wanting to feel seen go away fully. Right. So I think what I realized, there's this quote that I found on Twitter once that said, where all good quotes live.
Exactly.
Is that there's no external solutions to internal problems.
Exactly.
And so anything, whatever word you want to use, happiness, contentment, joy, peace, serenity, it will not come from acquiring something.
Yeah.
It's something material. I think like this is what happened. People like they achieve something material like Wall Street. So then it's like something else. It's like, I must make an impact. And like, even then you got to be careful.
Yeah.
Because you can't, whatever pain you hold, whatever sense of lack that you have, and we all have that. That's part of being human. Whatever sense of lack that you have will not be healed by achieving something new.
Yeah.
And I think, again, with my intuition on playbooks, I had an intuition that playbook was faulty.
Yeah.
And I still don't know the answer to that playbook. But I know that like pursuing things, even when I made the decision to grow RadReads, I'm like, hey, you have certain things that you feel, certain insecurities, certain fears, certain things that you don't like about yourself. It's like my inner monologue. Just a reminder, you know that like hiring 3 people is not going to fix those things.
Right.
And you're like,
so
are you still, are you still want to do it? Right? Do you still want to do it more for the intrinsic like joy or whatever that brings? And so I am constantly having that conversation with myself.
So it feels like a red pill moment, you know, to me, what you went through. And of course you shared about this in many interviews. Like given that now you kind of taken up a new video game, right? Kind of like writing your own rules and kind of creating your own, like solopreneur is kind of designing your own game, you know?
Yeah.
Even like designing your own levels of the game, like, right? So what does growth mean to you now? Like what lens do you view growth and growing and acquisitions? You know, like how do you view them?
Yeah, now. I think about this all the time because I think it really exploded when we have a team of 6. So it really exploded once we added 5 other people. Because when you're a solopreneur, like the degrees of freedom are still limited, right? It's like, oh, I should do this. I want to do this. But there's like a very tight constraint on your time. But when there's 5 people on your team, you can they're like, oh, I want the marketing person to do this. And I want the product person to do this. And I want the ops person to do this. And there's a lot of that happening now. And I have to like ground myself. Like one of the phrases that I always come back to is genuine care. Like I want to only partake in activities where there's a genuine care. And I always say like, if, we schedule this interview and let's say, yesterday someone was like, hey, Kate, you won the lottery. You're a billionaire, right? I still want to do this interview, right? And I want to bring the same level of attentiveness and genuine care to this interview. When I have a one-on-one with my direct report, I want to genuinely care about their well-being, their craft, the thing that we're working on together, not in the what isn't in it for me, but just because the concept of genuine care. Like when I surf, like I want to just know that I'm trying my best in that moment, right? And so I've tried to find like what is an overarching theme of my life that can kind of bring everything together. And guess what? Like if you genuinely care, you're probably going to be successful by, traditional definitions of success, right? You're probably going to make good money. You're probably be a good manager. You're probably be a good employee, right? Right. So that's kind of like, that's one lens. The other though is it's peace, I guess. Like, am I at peace? Yeah. And I'll say that I go through waves, but like, I think because of 5 employees and like each one of them could be doing like 50 different things. So I'm like thinking about 250 things that like I have every point in time. That hasn't brought me a lot of peace because I'm thinking about that. I'm thinking about SEO, keyword research. Like like I had a dream about keyword research last night. Like, that's fucked up. That's not peace, dude. So I'm kind of like, well, why do you care? Because I hand on my heart, I'm not doing it for the money. Right. Like I need to work, but like we'll be fine. Like 5 people, 3 people, 1 person, like it doesn't fucking matter. Right. For what I want out of life. Yeah. So then like, why are you dreaming about keyword research? Okay. And I think it is because of that game. Yeah. Right. And I think that's when I need to remind myself, like, look, that is a game. Right. And it's cool. Like it's a cool puzzle. Like keyword research is kind of like investing in stocks. Like it's kind of a bit of a black box and you try some shit out and you like see if it works and then like you make a little money if it works and if it doesn't you lose a little, like, but like that's not life. Right. Like it doesn't mean I shouldn't do it. And there's this phenomenal quote from the Bhagavad Gita that goes, you have the right to your work actions. You have the right to your actions. Yeah. but you don't have the right to the results of your actions.
Correct.
Right?
Yeah.
I might be paraphrasing it, but
no, I mean, no, you got it directionally right. Yeah.
So I'm like, okay, and that's a beautiful, powerful message. And I keep thinking about like, and the consequences of your actions, that's your ego.
Yeah.
Right. That's all that other stuff, the status, the validation, the Twitter likes, the followers. And like, and I keep trying to re-ground myself to be like, are you doing it? That's why like genuine care has been a helpful reminder. It's just like, like when you're writing I spent 40 minutes writing a tweet storm this morning. I'm like, are you doing this because you want more followers, or are you doing this because you actually are proud of the thing that you want to
share? Yeah.
And it's a creative expression. And if no one liked it, would you still feel good that you spent 40 minutes doing it?
Yeah. And I think that's the metric, right? If no external, metric, no positive external metric comes out of this, would I still do it? And if you can maximize those moments through your, week, I think you won. And that's where, I mean, kind of similar to zone of genius, but still zone of genius still has an implication that there's a consequence, there is an output you're measuring. I think the true freedom, Khe, I feel to your point, the first red pill is the freedom from money. Right, like freedom from that game. Like everyone's playing the game. I grew up in the game. I love that game. I respect it now, but I think I know where it leads. The second game is a lot of people in tech, around me in startups, they love to play this, which is the game of impact, which is still similar. Definitely more, I think, has a higher moral ground in my view, because, like if you see Elon Musk, why he doesn't need money, right? But he's truly pushing the boundaries of what humans can do. Massive respect. Still, that is still a game that is designed for this up down baseline happiness, thing. The only game I feel like, I mean, there's other things, like all these other games, but I feel like the only game seems to me, and it's something that I wish I remember more actively through the week, is the freedom from your mind, telling you, here's what you should be doing. It's like what Naval talks about, right? Not freedom of mind, freedom from mind. And our mind is constantly telling us, here's what you should be doing. I'm sure your mind was telling you, okay, here's what you should be doing. Assign 500 tasks on a Trello board to these 5 employees. Make sure they're feeling productive. Make sure you're feeling...
Do your keyword research.
Yeah. Or put this tweet storm out there. Same thing with me, different. And I think when you catch yourself not giving in to the tight grip of your mind's egos, wants, and needs, is when you get like tiny, precious little jewels of, like precious little pockets of peace.
Totally.
And I've gotten many of those through this interview. I have to compare. And I mean it, and that's why I think I do this.
Yeah.
Really, there's no ROI. Like literally, like this podcast has the shittiest ROI in my life. Like right now, I'm sure you feel the same way about some of the work you do. Like but there's a sense of intangible joy that I get. Right. Yeah. I know you mentioned joy in one of your interviews. It doesn't feel like hustle. It feels like joy.
Yeah. Yeah. And then take it a step further. I challenge all of your listeners to this.
Yeah.
What if ROI is actually the wrong thing?
Yeah.
Right?
What if JOY was the main thing?
Yeah. We've been conditioned to believe that if you're not maximizing ROI, you're fucking up.
Yeah.
What if first of all, we could think of the absurdity of that claim.
Yeah.
Right? Like it's actually not that hard to dispel the absurdity of it. But if you were to not see the absurdity of it, you're like, really? Like the ROI? I mean, I would say like if you're listening to this and you're like, no, ROI is the thing to max out. I would say, okay, look around in your life and think of 5 important things where ROI don't mean shit.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And think about that. Now, do you still feel the same way about it?
Yeah.
Right? And it's like, I think it's that red pill moment. It's kind of like opting. Like I've had it in many things, like growth. Like why is growth important? Right. Even like personal growth, that's a controversial one for some people. But if your personal growth brings you agitation, if your personal growth is motivated by agitation, and then brings you agitation, you need to take a deeper look at your desire for personal growth.
If you're striving for personal growth is sabotaging your inner peace.
Yes. You're playing the wrong
game with the wrong controls, right?
Exactly.
And there's another thing too that I think about. A lot of smart people, a lot of like high achievers really struggle with this. And this is a question that I ask myself when I'm driving, and I'm like, I have a spare moment to think is, I keep asking like, KP, if you're so smart, why are you not happy right now? Mm-hmm. And I'm like, I like to think that I'm actually have gotten like, personal growth wise, I've gotten smarter and smarter and understand the mechanics, the growth and all this. And then I pause and I have to like look at the red light sometimes. And I'm like, you know what? If I'm so smart, then why am I not happy right now? In this right moment. I don't care. The justification doesn't matter. I should be happy right now or at peace.
let's take it a step further. What is happiness?
Yeah.
Right? Is it pleasure? No.
Right. Definitely not.
Is it like smiling? No. Is it experiences? No. Is it impact? Maybe. Right? It's like,
well, yeah.
It's like that's a more meta question, which I think about all the time, and I don't have the answer to it.
Yeah. It's hard to, I mean, to your point, it's a very strange emotion.
Yeah.
And the closest I've gotten to is when I do like 15, 20 minutes of meditation and close my eyes, or 30 minutes sometimes, and then you feel that inner peace. That's the closest I've gotten to. Everything else feels like externally driven. Mm-hmm. Like something else happened, hence I'm happy.
Yeah.
Only thing I could see that was genuinely internally driven was I didn't do anything, sat there on a couch, closed my eyes, internally driven.
Yeah.
And so,
it's that, I mean, you and I have both like regrounded or anchored ourselves around that word peace, which I think is and again, you could use agitation or calmness or serenity or contentment, right?
Yeah.
I suspect, I don't want to go, I'm not a philosopher. Like, I don't want to go out and say like everyone wants peace. Like, no, that's not my job to decide that. And you shouldn't listen to me. But like, I think for me personally, especially with age, you just kind of like, especially when you like achieve things and you buy stuff and you're like, it's not it.
Yeah.
It's not it, dude.
Yeah.
It's not it. What is? I don't know, but that's not it.
Right. I love that. I think that's a great note to wrap this up. It's not it. It should be the title of this podcast. I'm just kidding.
Yeah.
the inner world of Khe. And then the headline is, it's not it. That's not it. I love it, man. I appreciate it so much. Thanks for coming by. And look, I mean, I know you've done tens of, maybe even hundreds of interviews on GTD, on Notion, on, 10X, 10K work. And so I wanted to kind of go into a different, slightly unbeaten, non-traditional path with you and kind of get like the man behind Khe, right? Like the mind behind Khe. So I appreciate you
for that, right?
Joining.
That's the 10K work right there.
And I take it from some of your reactions to the questions that you actually, some of them were like truly novel to you, and you were, you had to pause and think. And I love, those are the kind of things I love.
Exactly.
Yeah. And when you make you pause and think, shit, I didn't come prepared for that. Just like how I didn't come prepared to define what happiness was, man. Come on.
Yeah, there you go. You got your homework for tonight.
Right. I know. I got to go read that Bhagavad Gita again.
Exactly.
I appreciate it. This was fun. And let's keep in touch. All right.
Thank you, KP.
See you.